Hello, welcome back to Seawolf's Den. I'm reviewing Ron this time, reviewing another game. Been a while since I've done this, and I've been busy. I haven't done a lot of crafting either. I'm a little late to the party for this game. I've had it for a while. I was one of the first backers. I've been wanting to review it and kind of get to know it at the same time. I really had a chance to play it, quite honest with you. I never did an unboxing. I got this way before I started doing unboxing and stuff. It's now already 3 years old, which shocks me. And it's still going pretty strong despite its beginnings. It's the game Everyday Heroes. I'm gonna give my review. I haven't looked at anybody else's reviews, and I'm just gonna go from my perspective. Now, my background to this is that I was a big D20 Modern fan. I ran several different games, converted to D20 Modern, did a couple of campaigns, just loved it to death, and I did the Sci-Fi Companion. That was awesome. Of course, I'm a big Star Frontiers fan, and when they put Star Frontiers in that, I was there. And then once that ran its course, I went on to stuff like True 20, which is also more of a generic D20. And I sold all my books off once it kind of died out, and 4th edition DD came out, and I got more into Savage Worlds. But I was real excited when I heard that the guys that did D20 Modern got back together and put together a 5th edition version. Freely admit that I'm not the biggest D&D player. I don't hate it, I'm not a fantasy fan. If you look at my website, you look at all my stuff I do, the majority of my crafts, all are kind of sci-fi or modern based. But I do have the book. I did buy it, and I ran the box set many years ago. And of course, this is the 2014 version, and this game is based on the 2014 version, not the 2024. But I'm also a big Gen Xer. I love certain movies, and they had an amazing list of adventures to support this game, all licensed from 80s and 90s and 2000s movies licenses. I bought into that real quick. I saw Highlander, I saw Escape from New York, and I saw Rambo. With those, you have me. I got the Rambo PDF, and then I also got Highlander and Escape from New York, and I plan on reviewing those as well, but this will focus on Everyday Heroes. This review is going to be first and foremost in 3 parts. There are 3 sections in this formidable book. Part 1 will be this video, and it's going to be about heroes and the character creation and equipment. Everything behind the character that you're creating for this game system. Now, of course, things will change based on the setting. A lot will change based on the setting. Part 2 is going to be game rules, and I'm going to do that as a separate video. We're going to talk about the core system, what's different about it, and then mastering the game, which is just the game master section. Secondly, I know there's a lot of controversy and a lot of flurry around this book and how it was made and what happened behind it. I don't know enough detail to take sides on this. I'm not going to comment on that. I don't really feel like I need to, because I think everybody has part of the reason why I waited so long was kind of let that blow over. And I'm not entirely sure it has, but I haven't heard a lot. And it looks like the game is continuing. As I saw last, there was a Kickstarter for an Armory book, which I did buy into, and I looked at the website recently, and there's a lot more out there. So I'm just going to review this book, plus there'll be separate reviews for the 3 adventures I bought. Finally, I'm going to assume that you know at least something of D&D 5th edition. Core system, and I'm only really going to focus on the differences. To start with, the first and foremost, of course, is the attributes. Those haven't changed. Strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, charisma, intelligence. All the same. There are 2 ways you can do ability scores. There's the standard set, which they give a set of numbers, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. You assign them however you feel. Or you assign 8 to every ability and then distribute 27 points to get what you want. And then, of course, that translates to the modifiers, as we're all familiar with. Of course, being a modern game, in the core book, there is only one race, humans. So we don't dive into that unless you dive into separate settings that these settings will provide the races as they go along. Ancestries. I'm old school, I call them races. So after that, you get your background, and background is similar to D&D 5th edition, but not the same. Backgrounds kind of give you the overall start of your character. What pathway led him to his career? What pathway led to where he is now? And they come with ability score increases, skill proficiencies, equipment proficiencies, and iconic equipment. It does not, however, provide personality traits. Those are kind of dealt with later in the finishing touches. Once the backgrounds have gotten past that, you're going into professions. Now, this is an addition it's similar, very similar to backgrounds. It's the next level to backgrounds, and they also provide ability score increases, some languages, skill proficiencies, iconic equipment, and they also provide the wealth level in this game, much like D20 Modern. Those familiar with that, it provides a value for what you can buy. The economics are a lot different. For instance, you'll have a wealth level and you can buy certain equipment based on that wealth level. And I'll get into that with equipment. That'll be the last part of this review. Like I said, a profession is really what you resort back to when you're not doing anything else. The downtime. D&D 5th edition kind of mentions that. That's one of the things you do is on your downtime is your profession, and that's what this provides. And there's quite a bit of that. There's several pages of professions, and you can create your own. And I really enjoy that part of it, the flexibility for this game. And they provide a whole system to create your professions if you wanted to create your own setting with different professions. Classes are different. Classes are your basic classes. The 6 major classes, and the fact that there are 6 should clue you in that there's no coincidence, are strong, agile, tough, smart, wise, and charming. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Shock, surprise. Each one is associated to an attribute. Your strong character, you have a higher strength than normal, etc., etc., etc. Those are generic. And what I like about those is that can transition to any setting you want. Those are universal. Now, under that is an archetype. So you're not only buying into your class, you're buying into your archetype. Now, archetypes are subtypes to the class. Now, for instance, we'll go with the most easiest, the strong. The strong hero has a certain level of talents, and I'll get into level in a minute. And then under that are brawler, heavy gunner, and MMA fighter. Those are archetypes under strong class. Another big difference with class is the levels. There is only 10 levels to a class. So you can't have these godlike characters in Modern, which I like that. It definitely tones it down a little so that we don't have these crazy powerful characters. Every level of a class has, of course, a talent, and then a proficiency bonus and a defense bonus. That's another big difference that I'll get into in a minute. Your archetype has talents at every odd level. The reason I do odd is because every even you can have a feat. Feat is a required part of this game, and many of you old enough to remember in the D20 craze, that's what really kind of made D20 become crazy, was the number of splat books that were put out for so many feats. And I think that's why they toned down feats 5th edition, and they toned it down in this too, but it's still a part of it, and it acts as like another class ability, but you get to customize however you want, which I like. Of course, in D&D 5th edition, the ability score increase was built into the class and at every other level or something like that, and you could defer and get a feat instead. That's not the case here. They provide 3 archetypes for each class, but there could be more based on the setting or just stuff that maybe the GM made up. Once you have your background and your profession, and then you have your class and archetype, you just do the finishing touches. The finishing touches involve very similar to D&D 5th edition. I know the D&D 5th edition has ideals, bonds, and flaws, and in Everyday Heroes, they have kind of a persona. What they ask you to do is think about your motivations, and they have a list of suggested motivations. Attachments, much like bonds. Biography. What is your life's journey thus far? Which I think you just write kind of a general statement. Beliefs, much like ideals. And then role, appearance, virtues, kind of links back to ideals, flaws and quirks. And that pretty much irons out. Now the profession provides something else called the wealth level. Wealth level gets into equipment. The wealth level is how much you can afford to buy, how much you can pay for. There is a whole wealth system in this, much like they did in D20 Modern, for those that know. And I'll get into that once I get into equipment. I wanted to kind of get into some of the other finishing touches. One of the biggest differences between Everyday Heroes, and aside from 10 levels, the archetype and class, is that armor does not modify what we know as the AC. Armor has a armor value, and weapons have a penetration value. The armor class is not armor class. Those that know D20 Modern and all its different iterations, it's defense. It's called defense. And that is less about how hard it is to cause damage and more about how hard it is to hit you. That's really what defense is. Then once you get into the armor values, that's how hard it is to damage you. That takes away from damage that's hitting you. There's a whole system behind that. And that pretty much sums up the character creation. The other part we're going to get into is the equipment, buying equipment and breaking equipment, and the encumbrance rules. We'll get into other rules like burst fire, chase mechanic. When we get into the rules section, one of the things that I noticed missing that was in D20 Modern was what they call the FX abilities, or the supernatural abilities, the spells and psionics. That was in D20 Modern. It is not anywhere in here. I know that they'll probably have something like that in each setting book that if it applies, but when I looked at the website recently, one of the planned books is Everyday Arcana, and that'll be a separate book for magic and psionics and all that stuff. So know going in that there is no supernatural abilities in here, although some of the creatures in the end in the back section are supernatural. You can probably integrate magic from D&D in some fashion or another, but that's not present. Despite the size, I think that's my biggest complaint. It's huge and you've got so much in here, but you don't have any kind of basic supernatural abilities for characters to play. You don't have the classes. You don't have, and I get it, in the original D20, they didn't have that up front. They included that at the end in the Urban Arcana section. And they included a lot of the spells and all that. I think that's just a shortcoming. That's the only shortcoming I would ever give it. If that's the only flaw, I'm good with it, because the rest of it is just so fantastic. All right, in the final chapters, and I mean chapters because I forgot to mention, there is another chapter in Heroes after Final Touches equipment. As far as buying equipment and all that, it is done through the wealth system, and you have a wealth rating. And it ranges from 0 to 6, 0 being dirt poor, penniless, and then 6 being filthy rich. And you can pretty much buy anything. Every item has a price level. If it's lower than your wealth level, then you can just buy it. Now, if it's not, then there's a mechanic that surrounds buying and getting a loan and all this other stuff. And you can also gain and lose wealth, obviously. So there is a simple and broad system surrounding getting equipment or buying equipment, not keeping up with every gold piece and silver piece and all that. I personally love that. The other thing I love about this is it provides you with career-focused equipment packs that are standard, and then give a price level for them. If it is lower than your wealth level, then it is assumed you have at least this. And there's a good number of them, and it can be more. There can be, the GM can create his own packs. Also, there are kits, and a good number of them. For instance, burglar kit, camping kit, chemistry kit, all those kind of things. There is a bulk and encumbrance, so you can't be this big gun bunny that carries a bag of guns. There's a picture of a guy carrying a motorcycle, which, is ridiculous. So you really have to kind of keep that in mind and really just assume you have a certain number of things that are on your person, and so you don't always carrying your assault rifle. Now, the biggest thing, and I'm going to get a little into the rules here. Weapons and armor have, respectively, penetration value and armor value. I really like this. It takes it out of the armor class. I was never a big fan of putting your armor. It's more of an abstraction that I'm willing to buy into. So if it is now a means to protect yourself. It's not how hard to hit you. It's now, the armor is now absorbing damage. And there is a certain level of abstraction, and I do like this. When I was running Star Frontiers a long time ago, I just didn't like the armor that was provided in the game, so I created my own armor inspired by another game, and I did a penetration value, and I did kind of a structural points to each armor, and eventually those would drain down and you'd have to buy a new one. This one abstracts that a little. So what it is you have a penetration value. So if you're being shot at, it has a penetration value. If that is lower than your armor value, then you are protected. If it is higher, you have to make an armor save. And that is just a D20 versus 10 or half the damage, whichever is higher. you're rolling a d20 plus. If you have a proficiency in the armor, add that. If you succeed, it absorbs the damage. Fail, either way, the armor is considered damaged, and the next time you roll for that armor check, it is at a disadvantage. So it utilizes the mechanics provided in 5th edition to do some very nice and very cool things. It provides improvised weapons, which are quite common in a normal modern game. And of course, then we go into the military equipment. It abstracts everything. A machine gun heavy, instead of giving us an M60 or something like that. It just abstracts it to a general name, and then you can make more specific rules based on the type of gun it is. Guns and all other equipment have properties, and they do this in Savage Worlds. Love it. And it could be full auto. It could be considered heavy. So it's like traits that would make that weapon or a piece of equipment unique, like modern bow, two-handed. That's a trait. It is pretty exhaustive in terms of how much equipment is in here. I mean, it goes through weapons like I've covered, but it also has specialty equipment, everything else, ammunition, electronics, and then it gets into vehicles. Vehicles are a big part of the chase rules, obviously, and they're generic, like it's just a pickup truck, a minivan, a sports car, and it gives you a range of stats that are applied to driving and chasing. Number of passengers, strength, dexterity, constitution. Those are values of the vehicle. And then it has R value, price level, of course, top speed. Then again, these have properties. Like a minivan is huge. Bicycle, accident prone, exposed, medium, and muscle powered. Outside of that, the final chapter I meant to mention and forgot is chapter 7 in the hero section, feats. Those familiar with Savage Worlds, feats have kind of been boiled up into kind of edges or advantages, more ways to customize your character. I kind of wish, in my personal opinion, because I'm biased towards Savage Worlds, that there was a balancing factor, kind of like hindrances, but there is sort of, but they're more role play based, and the character can make it up, like the stuff that is wrapped up in Persona. Those are, kind of abstract, non-rules based, unlike, say, Savage Worlds that has mostly rules-based hindrances. Some of them aren't. If they're just role-playing, there's a GM factor that they can be rewarded for role-playing them, getting a Benny. In this system, it does that to give you advantage or something along those lines. But I kind of wish there was more of a way of rounding out your character with some disadvantages, so to speak, that balance out these feats. But that's just me. Still, these feats are great. There are generic ones and general ones, and then advanced ones, and then ones for every class. There are dozens. And of course, a GM can create more, or a setting will probably bring more in, and I'll get into that with the adventures. That's it in the hero section. We dive into game rules in the next video. I look forward to this because I already like the means at which you can customize your character. Yes, I want more disadvantages as well as advantages, but I'm okay with it has that 5th edition feel and kind of an upgrade to it for modern. I like it a lot, and I'm already starting to think about how I would run this. This book is fantastic. I mean, just look at it. It's huge, it's beautiful, it has fantastic art. And it's very thorough in the way it handles character creation. Next is part 2, game rules. Until next time, seek the wolf in thyself.